ever heard the expression, a rolling stone gathers no moss? Well, I just learned recently that for some people this implies that if one doesn't settle into a place, space, career, or community, then they will make little of their life. But whenever I heard that expression, I thought it sounded kind of good. It sounded like a life full of mobility and adventure and maybe not being so burdened. Up until recently, this little stone, me, was relatively mossless. I grew up in 4 different countries, the US, Japan, Singapore, and India. And as an adult, I continued to lean into my innate wanderlust and travel the US and abroad. During one stint, I spent 2 years exploring and working when possible in Fiji, upstate New York, Hawaii, New Zealand, Australia, and then topped it off with an amazing month hiking the Annapurna circuit in Nepal. So folks would ask me often, why do you travel so much? And I used to glibly reply with, because I love it. And I do. But why? When I dug a little deeper, I realized traveling promised me disruption, an interruption of my life happening in the normal kind of way. And this made me feel really good. It made me feel alive. By submerging myself in different environments, cultures, often via one-way tickets, limited funds, staying off the beaten path, I was promised plenty of disruption. All my best, not all, but most of my best laid plans ran afoul. I didn't have routine, nothing was predictable, and this felt good. In effect, I was a little stone hurling itself down a mountainside, allowing the friction of disruptions to scrape off any moss that was beginning to gather. So why would this feel good per se? Because doesn't disruption equal disturbance? In our culture, these words are used interchangeably, but when we look at the definition, there's a nuance there that I think is pretty important. So disruption is an interruption in the normal course of something. In this case, the river is getting interrupted by the dam. For disturbance, this means the interruption of a state of peace, quiet, or calm. And within a human context, this points to maybe our reaction to a disruption. And when I look back at my favorite travel times, I realized that there was often a disruption involved, but I was able to hold on to some element of peace, calm, or quiet, and that is when I felt really good and alive. So this is what I kind of invite us to play with tonight. Is there a way to feel good in a disruption? Question mark, I don't know. But I will point out that this Insta-perfect photo is not realistic. This is actually more what disruption looks like. And this pillow was covered in black mold. I mean, this picture makes it look nice, but the pillow is pretty nasty. Slept on it that night, you know, I'm alive. So here's a story. It's 3 a.m. I just arrived in Kathmandu after grueling flights and layovers. And I'm exhausted. And also I'm pretty anxious because the singular purpose of this trip is to hike the Annapurna circuit, reaching elevations I'd never come close to, but I heard could be deadly. So I was having anxiety for a lot of time. Just getting to the trailhead was going to be 3 more days of bumpy travel. So I'm standing there at the baggage claim, waiting, and then I realize everyone's gone. Because that didn't arrive. And I've been living out of that for 2 years. So it was carefully curated. Also, I took this photo 3 days ago, so let's give it to Coleman. Sorry. But what wound up happening was pretty cool. So, and I do get to this place, but I'm standing there, I'm having basically a panic attack. And in the midst of that buzz of discomfort, something bizarre happened, and the best words I can use are, a cool, calm, quiet thing arose in me. And in that state, I found myself walking over to the baggage official, and as I was speaking to him, I noticed I felt more open-hearted and kind and friendly than like ever in my life. which makes no sense. And he reciprocated with kindness. He gave me a phone number. He said, call this multiple times a day, and we'll get your bag back. And I said, okay. And then the next morning set out on foot to buy clothes and much needed toiletries, and then ran into this place, a monkey temple. And it was in full swing of an annual celebration. And the monkeys were going crazy. There were a lot of humans, a lot of snacks and soft drinks, and the monkeys were getting after it. It was super fun to watch. And then that place sort of led me to another, and another, and another. And then my favorite spot that I chanced into was the secret garden. I was walking past the 20-foot cement wall, and there was a little opening, and I poked my head in. I was like, whoa, can I come in here? And they said, sure, pay us money and come enjoy this beautiful secret garden. And it was totally an oasis. So 3 days of waiting for the bag wound up being 3 days of really fun adventuring. And when I look back, I realize, I think that cool, calm thing that rose up in me like a lotus through the mud was playing some kind of guiding role. So I'd like to now bring us into the world of nature for another analogy. So ecology is the study of the relationship between organisms and their environment. And there's great interest in what happens to an ecosystem when it gets disrupted. In science, we typically use the word disturb, but we're not going to get confused tonight. We're going to say disrupted. And it'll undergo different processes. Secondary succession specifically outlines nature's recovery process when a disruption like a wildfire, flooding, earthquake leading to landslide, or logging and many other human modifications causes a disruption, but soil remains, maybe a smattering of plants. As we move through this analogy, I'd like to point out something pretty obvious, but I'm going to say it anyway, that the human lifespan is different from that of a forest. So the timescales don't align. So let's imagine that a disruption takes place. In this case, an earthquake causing a landslide that denudes a large swath of land, stripping it of vegetation and surface layers and leaving behind soil. In a human life, this could be likened to the loss of a job, a breakup, or a health concern. We're discombobulated, disoriented, maybe stress hormones are being released. In some cases, we might even lose sense of identity. In my very small instance, in Nepal, this would be going, oh, I don't have my bag, and I was really banking on that to anchor me this evening. So. Next, we move into the invasion of pioneer species from nearby areas or from propagules hiding in the soil. And these are the first on the scene. They begin the recovery process. They are notably resourceful, fast-acting, and tenacious. They begin binding the soil with their roots. They provide shade. They retain moisture in the system. And they provide plenty of habitat and food for other organisms. They play a really important role for recruiting other organisms into the area and building up the ecosystem over time. They're not very glamorous, but they are important. In a human life, this could be likened to our first deliberate responses to a disruption. So pioneer species remind us to be incredibly resourceful in these moments, both internally and externally, and then find our tenacity and act swiftly, even amidst high seas of emotions. Easier said than done. Stepping out onto a barren landscape that's desolate with no clear end in sight is pretty scary. It's pretty uncomfortable. But these organisms remind us to take that step forward anyway, using tenacity, and reminding ourselves that the resources we need, the nutrients, life-giving nutrients we need are available, they're there. For me, it was taking those steps to the baggage official, asking for help, and then being present and calm enough to receive the help that was given. Next, we have intermediate stages. So this is a time of a lot of growth and a lot more diversity. Population sizes are increasing, and diversity of organisms is also increasing, and with that, we get conflict. And also, for example, a shrub species might move in and outcompete a little pioneer species for sun and nutrients. Or the overall increase of vegetation creates a lot more shade and therefore reduces average temperature and increases humidity. So now the environment is suitable to get more organisms that want to come in. So this stage, this era is full of a lot of growth. And then notable feedback, sometimes uncomfortable, sometimes a species won't make it, and refinement to what is best suited to the environment. In a human life, there's been an unfolding of events, leading us to a wide variety of options. We're getting feedback from our surroundings and from the people around us, and this leads to some course corrections, maybe some setbacks, some dead ends. This could be frustrating, discombobulating, but ultimately we're honing our new path. So there is momentum, and an unfurling of life is happening. For my example in Nepal, this would be the 3 days of following the breadcrumbs of curiosity and having an awesome blossoming of events. Now we're at the relatively stable era of the climax community. So the ecosystem is now in equilibrium, and population sizes are staying within a sustainable range. The species here are best adapted to the average conditions of the geographic zone and climate. And we've kind of reached a point where we can exhale. We're back to square one-ish. Because this new normal is a little different than the old normal, or it could be a lot different. But one thing that's for sure is our palette of experience is significantly richer. Furthermore, we might have gotten under the moss a little bit to better know the core of who we are. For me, I finally hiked the Annapurna Circuit. Yay! And I would like to point out that there were so many more disruptions, and some that were really serious, like worse than the bag. But I really loved that time of my life. I came out of there a changed woman. Okay, I've wondered this a really long time. And if anyone has answers, like, let's meet up in the lobby, that'd be great. If change and disruption are the constants in life, the one thing we can bank on, the one thing, then why are humans so afraid of it? Why do we really kind of suck at navigating them? I wonder that all the time. Is there a way that we can wield our brains a little differently so that we can meet the inevitable disruption with a little more ease, a little grace, maybe even like, oh, hello there, disruption, I've been waiting for you. I don't know, because that'd be cool, right? To that end, let's review this analogy again as maybe anchoring points. So nudation occurs where a disruption happens and strips away normal, strips away an end in sight, and we're discombobulated and probably quite uncomfortable. Invasion of pioneer species teach us to be extremely resourceful, and then be tenacious and take action, even if the landscape is really weird looking and scary. The intermediate stages are full of events leading to events, and then options with plenty of feedback and refinement. And then the climax community, we have relative stability, and we're well adapted to our new environment. And I say that because the environment has been changing alongside with us over time. Sometimes we say, I wish I could just go back to the way things used to be, but that's not what's happened. Everything's changing. Also, during this phase, it's a great time to give ourselves permission to really relax. Like, we deserve it, because there's going to be another disruption. So, with that said, life's really messy, and sometimes a disruption can happen within a disruption. Or sometimes a disruption is so significant that only rock remains. And that's part of nature too. All right, another thing is we're all different. So for me, settling down, putting roots down, getting some moss was an upheaval. But whatever muddies your water, I invite you into this experiment of playing with disruption, reducing disturbance, hanging on to the peace, quiet, and calm, and seeing what blossoms. And also, if you're feeling a little stuck or disconnected from the core of who you are, consider finding a way to go knock your moss off. Thank you.